So now it's my pleasure to introduce the next session, Unpacking the Meaning of Data as a Strategic Asset. I'm going to bring Max from Sapphire Ventures back to the stage, and with him will be a guy that some of you may have heard of. His name is Aaron Levie. You probably know Aaron as the young, impressive entrepreneur who co-founded the enterprise cloud company Box. But what you might not know about Aaron is that in 2013, he was named Entrepreneur of the Year by Inc. magazine for his ability to beautifully execute the company's pivot and his foresight about technological change and what users need. Aaron is also a magician. So we were thinking you could just spend the next 45 minutes up here doing magic tricks. You know, to heck with this data stuff. Perfect. Aaron and his co-founder originally launched Box off of poker winnings. Tell me if this isn't true. And they literally built the company out of a renovated garage. Okay, so there's actually some truth to that classic startup cliche, right? And then finally, Aaron has been known to tweet tips such as, take the stodgiest, oldest, slowest moving industry that you can find and build amazing software for it. So without further ado, Max and Aaron.
All right. So I think we've had a productive morning so far. I'm pretty excited for what's coming next because Aaron is both smarter and wittier than I am.
Okay.
So I'm going to let that take stage. Most of you know Aaron and know Box, are pretty familiar. What you don't know about Aaron is that over the course of our friendship, I've realized that he is one of the best thinkers from sort of a business strategy perspective and a fervent student of what happens in the ecosystem. So we have a wonderful opportunity to kind of talk about data as a strategic asset, which is something that the two of us have been writing about for some time. And I think outside, there are a couple of articles printed that we published in the HBR. And it's going to be a good conversation. But before we kick off,
yes,
it's been a busy year for you.
It has.
Probably feels pretty good.
Yeah, depending on the day, yeah.
And I'm interested to know when you're going to start tweeting fervently again.
Right, with like forward-looking information and
yeah.
stuff. Yeah. I don't know. My Twitter game has been pretty bad recently. I agree.
It's true.
I'm not dedicating as much time as I was, and literally 1/3 of my tweets are related to Donald Trump. So I need to expand my repertoire a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I guess I would just need more things to happen in the internet, and then I will keep tweeting. So
there we go.
It's really just correlated with the number of tech companies that do ridiculous things. So
see, I was worried that it was because of the public company stance perspective,
right.
But it's just not enough companies lighting money on fire right now.
There's not enough of that. But no, I mean, I don't think my lawyers would. I'm sure they would like it to slow down, but it's not. I haven't slowed down because we're public. It's just because we need more crazy shit to happen.
Got it. So now back to the serious stuff.
Okay, good.
BoxWorks.
Yes.
You talked a lot about transformation.
Yes.
I mean, that was the core theme. It's what we opened up today with.
Okay.
Actually, I stole a lot of your points.
Thank you.
For this crowd.
Sure.
So you have Aaron to thank. Why now? Why is today different than it was 10 years ago and 20 years before that?
Yeah, so obviously stuff that we've thought a lot about, which is we are in I think certainly the most interesting time from a technology industry standpoint. And who's at a company that's in the tech industry, and then who's at a company that's not in the tech industry? Okay, so I think we're going to take a lot of this for granted because it seems like most of the group is in the tech space to some extent. But what's so exciting is that outside of the tech industry, so if you go sort of east of Fremont and you look at the world and how business is changing right now, whether it's in transportation, whether it's in hospitality, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in industrial kind of manufacturing, every one of these businesses is in some form or another being either disrupted by or enabled by technology in a highly kind of profound way. And And again, there's literally every industry and almost every company in each industry has a different approach to this and has a different opportunity with it. But when we think about how much business is going to change in the next 10 or 20 years because of the abundance of technology, because of the new disruptive kind of capabilities that have emerged, I think we're going to see complete transformation in essentially every single industry. And for the first time ever, we again kind of take this for granted being in Silicon Valley. We have so many startups that are emerging where the technology that they're built, the technology is sort of a byproduct of what they're doing. They're tech companies, but they're in transportation. They're in hospitality. They're in healthcare. They're going to be the future of life sciences. They're going to be the future of car ownership. They're going to be the future of how you stay during a trip. And they're using technology at the center of what they do, and then enabled by networks, enabled by contract manufacturing, enabled by contractors. They're going after a lot of these industries. And what's exciting is that for anybody kind of paying attention is that for the first time, non-tech industries are being disrupted by technology and the forces that drive the tech industry. And so what we see and what I spend a lot of my time doing is working with a lot of our kind of traditionally non-tech companies, the Eli Lillys, the General Electrics, the Chevrons of the world that are figuring out how do they begin to reinvent themselves with technology. And I think that the past 30 years of IT, the past 30 years of kind of this whole software and technology ecosystem has just been laying the foundation for what we're about to see happen. And we're only seeing kind of minute glimmers right now of what that's going to look like. But in 10 years from now, the world's going to be very different in this respect.
So here's the follow-up question.
Okay.
I'm sure you have examples of companies that are doing well.
Yep.
And companies that aren't.
Yep.
Who's most impressive from a physical industrial business that's been able to embrace software and technology at the core?
Yeah, I think certainly the classic example that is being written about a lot and people think about a lot is General Electric. And the reason for that is actually not an accident. I mean, they are truly reinventing their entire business and business model and economics of their business and the talent of their business because of software and because of technology. They actually announced that GE Digital, which is their software business unit, they want to have be a top 10 software company by 2020. So they are literally turning into a software company that also happens to sell you energy, sell you transportation, sell you different kinds of industrial services, but with software and data and technology at the core of that. And so what's cool is we obviously have a little bit of this is you can share the history if you want, but
sure.
Has anybody read the Michael Porter article in HBR from a month and a half ago? Anybody?
It's out there on the desk if
yes.
you want it.
Okay, good. Everybody should read it. Max and I wrote it, so Michael Porter kind of took credit for it. So basically, it's a really great article because it talks about how using we see in the tech industry, we see Internet of Things as this very obvious trend. It's like, okay, so you're putting sensors on a physical device or product. You're capturing a lot of data. We're going to optimize that physical thing. That's what the power of the Internet is. If you're an industrial company and you think about the power of Internet of Things, you don't really care about the technology itself. You don't care about the sensors and the Moore's Law piece and the data piece. We're going to talk about the data piece. What you care about is how this is going to change your business and how it's going to change your products and how it's going to change how you're serving your customers. And so for a GE, what they realized was, and I think GE is one of the first to realize this at scale, is in a world where you can continue to optimize your jet engine performance or your windmill performance or your locomotive performance, then you're actually in the services business as opposed to the product and manufacturing business. And so what they've actually done is realize, well, if we're in the services business, then what we should probably do is just license the output of what our product and technology is delivering, not necessarily sell you the thing. So they're moving much more into a model where they want to license you the energy output of your windmill farm, or license you the fuel efficiency of your jet engine, as opposed to just selling you the jet engine. It's going to be a static object. And so when you think about almost every industry, every organization has their version of this, right? In 20 years from now, do we really need to own a car that's a depreciating asset Or are we just going to have that be an on-demand service? And is that going to come from a handful of companies that are maybe different than today's car manufacturers? In a world where we can consume media on any platform on demand anywhere, why are we going to pay $150 for 100 channels when we could just buy the things that we want direct coming to us? And so every industry has their own form of this disruption. I think GE is doing it incredibly well. I think Walmart is starting to understand the power of some of these trends relative to maybe some of their other kind of equally incumbent retailers. You have some pharmaceutical or life sciences companies that are recognizing the power of data, and then you have a whole bunch of others in every one of these industries that is very, very early in their journey in this direction.
So earlier we talked about kind of data being a critical asset,
yeah.
right? And the fact that data is replicable, it's scalable, and it's defensible. And these, by the way, are the core points that we made to the HBR 2 years ago or whenever it was,
yeah.
that they deferred until they could publish it with Mike Porter's name.
Right. That happens.
It does, apparently. Apparently this isn't like a thing that happens fairly often.
Yes, people get the Michael Porter shaft.
Yeah,
yeah.
That was us. But so we talked about that, like data is this thing that can fundamentally transform business. And you mentioned GE. Something that we've talked about in the past is GE has this particular advantage, right? Because it's really hard to make a turbine.
Yep.
It's not as hard to make other things,
right?
Like to run a
thermostat.
Cab business or make a thermostat.
Right.
So have you seen, how do you think about the prospects for companies that make thermostats, for instance?
Yep.
Things that are easy to manufacture but
yep.
need to get digital fast.
Yeah, I think so we talk about data, I think, a little bit differently than I think is sort of well understood today, mm-hmm. and that was you really should read the Michael Porter article because it sort of emphasizes a lot of these points. But when you go to most companies and you ask them about their data strategy or how they're understanding their information, it tends to be, for the most part, a fairly immature understanding of the power of all the data they have. And usually people will be, when they think about data, they think about maybe it's analytics about the market that they're going after. Maybe it's information and intelligence around who's buying their products. Maybe it's competitive data. Maybe it's just all their customer records. But the power of data, in particular in any of these industries that we're talking about, is how it accumulates over time and gets more rich at scale, and then ultimately leads to more and more competitive advantage over time. And so we are, I think we're at a stage where that's starting to be better understood, where if you can be in if you are a thermostat business and you're selling and building a thermostat, then the real value is probably in the network that you're going to be able to create and the network effects of all the data you're going to generate, and then over time, tune and create, more personalized and prescriptive experiences because of all of the information that you're gathering, not only about one individual, but about patterns over time across a large set of people. So thinking about data in the sense of the network effects of your ecosystem, mm-hmm. of your customer base, and then continuing to improve your products because of that, is an approach that few non-technology companies I think are adapting to and recognizing. And this is going to become even more important when you think about self-driving cars, where the whole power is the winners in self-driving cars are not going to be the best car companies. It's going to be the best companies that understand how to use all of the intelligence of all of the cars at scale to make every single car better and drive better and more performantly and be safer. And that's actually a data problem. It's not a car problem. Mm-hmm. And so you're seeing the value shift going forward in where the expertise is going to need to be in a lot of these companies. And so this is why Google or a Tesla or an Uber is in a much more naturally kind of strong position than a GM or a Ford or a traditional car company, because the hard part is no longer the manufacturing process of the car. It's the software and the intelligence and the ability to aggregate and make sense of large amounts of data, like we're talking about like exabytes of data, to be able to make those cars be smarter and more intelligent at scale and benefit from the entire network. And so So you have this huge problem where any business where the value is going to be on a very different dimension over time than where that company has traditionally been strong is an area where you're going to see this disruption take place. So, and we've sort of played around with this term industrialist dilemma, which is, for 20, 50, or 100 years, a lot of these companies have gotten really, really good at certain processes, whether it's a manufacturing process, whether it's an operational process of deploying retail stores, whether it's a distribution, process. A lot of those things are now either table stakes or they're relatively trivial because I can get them on demand from contract manufacturing or contractors or some other form of utilizing assets. And so the hard part now is the software, it's the intelligence, it's the data, and the other stuff, the old stuff, is either easy or it's relatively taken as a given. And so so the dilemma is all the things you used to be good at is no longer what is going to make you competitive in the future. And we have a whole new set of strengths that are required, and a lot of companies have not been able to adapt fast enough to what that looks like. If you look at the, Chrysler was hacked, 2 or 3 months ago. The Jeep was kind of taken over, and it was probably a little bit more dramatic than what the impact was. But it's a classic example of a traditional manufacturing company that sort of adds software on top of what they do, to maybe a Tesla, which is software is baked into what they do, and the way that they design the car, the way they design the security model of the car, the way that they separate different controls within the car is going to be completely different than what a traditional manufacturer that's adding software on top of what they do is going to deliver. So this is the real challenge that I think a lot of incumbents have is understanding how are you going to build your company, or how are you going to adapt your company fast enough before the tech-centric versions of your industry, can get really, really good at what you do.
Yep. So I'm going to tell a little bit of an anecdote because I think it plays into this. The first time I got on a phone call with Aaron to talk about this article that we were going to write and submit was with our co-author, James Allworth. And the three of us were kind of riffing back and forth, and we started talking about this particular conversation with CIOs. And Aaron said, every time I walk in and have this conversation, somebody looks at me like I'm a space alien. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, in the last 2 years, has that changed? And what's that pivotal point that made people start realizing, if so, that this is something they need to pay attention to?
Yeah, I think it's certainly changing, commensurate with how obvious this disruption is now playing out. Like I was with the CIO of a large financial services institution 2 days ago, and their biggest threat, they're in the insurance business, their biggest threat that they fully recognized was in a world of where everybody's on Uber and you don't own a car, or self-driving cars don't crash nearly as much, then they know that the insurance model is completely different for car insurance in that future state. And 2 or 3 years ago, that would have been an incredibly speculative notion that a top executive of an insurance company would maybe be looking at through a speculative lens, but not actually adapting the business around. And so they're recognizing that they need to be in a whole bunch of different businesses very quickly by the time by the time that this part of the market changes or slows down. So I think over time we're recognizing, customers are recognizing how disruptive these forces are. Every 3 or 6 months, it gets more obvious, I think, to the non-tech industry how disruptive these forces are. I think the one thing that still we haven't quite figured out is both what is how do you think about information within a large enterprise? So right now most enterprises don't know how to value their data or their information. Right? We've sort of joked there's no line item on the balance sheet for your data or for your information. We don't have any way of sort of articulating or calculating what is the raw value of that. And when you think about an Uber or an Amazon or a Netflix, the majority of their value is the data they have and the ability for them to use that data to make better, more competitive decisions. And we have no way of putting a price on that. All we know is their revenue and their assets and their people, and that's all we look at. And so over time, I think you're going to start to see you're going to start to see differential valuations emerge for companies that have large amounts of data, and that gives them a massive competitive advantage over companies that know nothing about their customers, that can't actually predictably invent the right product in the future, that can't compete with Netflix's ability to make sure that they're buying the right content. I mean, the difference between HBO and Netflix is one knows every single thing about every single one of their customers and everything that they watch, and the other puts out a show once a week, and they have to have survey data that comes back that says who's watching what. Well, which one is more predictably going to buy the right content for their customer base? And so that starts to determine competitive advantage over time in a way that we don't know how to value. So I think that's one part that's probably missing from the conversation just because it's so early. And then the other part is for everyone in this room, which is what is the role of the CIO in that world where fundamentally the I in CIO is actually one of the most important things for the future of capitalism, and you actually have to care about information and what you're doing with that information and how you're powering your business with that data and that information. And that's I think a thing that because the CIO has been around for 20, 30, 40 years or whatever in roughly its current form, we sort of have gotten used to thinking about it as okay, well, we deploy infrastructure and applications and software, and we keep the lights on in the business, and people should have a phone line, and they should have email access. We have to kind of take a step back and say, let's actually go back to the core of this. What is the power of having information in the right hands of your employees, of your partners, of your customers, of building products around that data and that information, and how are we going to actually begin to kind of transform our businesses, with all of that? And I think that just requires sort of stepping back and saying, okay, it's not about the infrastructure, it's not about the architecture, it's actually about the experiences that you're creating, it's about the data that you're generating that is going to make better experiences, and I think that's maybe a pretty significant transformation for the role and the job.
So I'm going to ask a question of the audience. So who's an IT executive? Raise your hand. Who is an IT executive in a cost center position, technically? Are you considered a cost center? All right, so it's about half more. If you're in a cost center, if you're treated as an executive in charge of managing, keeping the lights on at lower and lower costs over time, how do you influence?
Well, I think that can't be. I mean, that's not going to last in the future. So I would just refute the basis of the question. I think that has to change. So I don't know how. I mean, yeah, you get cheaper things that are faster, that are easier, and then you quickly adapt to being a profit center. And I think the cool thing right now, and sorry, I mean, we didn't really talk about the evolution of technology in this entire process. The only reason this is even possible is actually because of cloud. These things are not decoupleable. The only reason we can talk about data and not have it be completely hypothetical is that the actual computing now is abundant. The resources, we're in a resource abundant world from a technology standpoint. So the problem is if you're spending more than a month trying to figure out what your email solution is going to be, or what your HRIS solution is going to be, or for our sake, what your content management system is going to be, then you're probably doing it wrong. These are not the hard problems anymore. There are a few leading vendors in every one of these categories. Certainly, you want to get down the price or whatever, but the interesting problem is, what am I going to do that makes my business more competitive than the other companies in my space using technology? Not getting the basics right. Not deploying help desk and email and collaboration and content management and our HRIS. That's the simple stuff now, and it wasn't the simple stuff 20 years ago, because to make those decisions you had to buy lots of infrastructure, and that infrastructure cost way too much money, and because we were just too many Moore's law cycles away from where we are today. You had to have lots of system integration. It was just that was 90% of your time was going into all of that. So now if we can maybe invert this, and 10% of your time maybe was thinking about innovation, like building the e-commerce site, like getting up the website, doing a few things on the internet for customers. That was the emergence of e-business. Today, if we can invert this, if we could say, like, let's actually make 10 or 20% of the job of IT the basics, because the basics are just so abundant and so easy to accomplish now. Of course, you have to care about security. You have to choose your vendors wisely. Now, what if we had 60, 70, 80% of the time of the CIO and at least the sort of strategic parts of IT go into how do we begin to run our business in more strategic ways using this information? How can we shrink our business processes? How can we connect the dots better for employees? How can we deliver better customer experiences because we have better data about who they are or about what products they're buying or about what markets we need to get into? How do we actually completely change the products that we build because we can connect it up to data? So I think all of these things are where every CIO, every IT organization, needs to head toward.
So it begs the next question. We've talked a lot about kind of what the industrial company looked like in the past.
Yeah.
Do you think the traditional IT organization of like an industrial vendor has the right skill set to do what you just said? Like, what are the core components of being able to tackle those new opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly, again, this is where Silicon Valley has a huge advantage because we're just in the center of it all. We get the best practices ripple through very quickly, and you're kind of seeing the future faster than a lot of other parts of the world. So you go to if you go to a mid-market company in the Midwest, not to pick on the Midwest, no offense. You still have usually an IT organization that's focused on those basics, and the strengths are you've got DBAs that know how to keep the database online. You have people that are backing up servers. You have people that are really good at fault tolerance of core IT systems. That's the stuff that again, like, Google can handle that, Microsoft can handle that, Box can handle that, Salesforce can handle that for you. So that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is, do you have people that can orchestrate and integrate applications? Can you build applications on top of these platforms to change the customer experiences that you're creating? Can you integrate data in new ways? Can you shrink business processes? That's some mix of a business-oriented mindset, of an application development-oriented mindset, of a data science-oriented mindset. So those are probably the skill set. Security, obviously, those are probably more of the trend of skill sets that we're seeing become more important over time. It's not you don't really need to know about middleware anymore. You don't really need to know about about backing up servers anymore. Those are not the basic sort of IT ops kind of work is largely being handled for you by whatever your kind of cloud service providers are. And fighting that and trying to slow that down is only going to ensure that in 5 years from now, when it's not a trend, it's the standard, you're not going to have the talent, you're not going to have the people to be able to kind of adapt quickly enough. And so I think that I think the most difficult situations we see is when you see organizations resist this in any significant way, because it's really they're not going to have the feedback loops and the cycles of improving their talent and optimizing what their workforce looks like by the time that actually it's fundamentally necessary that they made the transition, versus the companies that started on this journey 5 years ago or 10 years ago, who their future IT stack is a bunch of cloud services, and now they're building on top of that. And like what goes away is again, like the easy stuff is the application layer or even the platform layer, and now the really interesting stuff in IT is the set of services above that and the capabilities above that. And that's the companies that are investing in that are the ones that are certainly going to be in a much better position going forward.
So this is sort of a softball question.
Okay,
I have to put it in. So what's the role of a partner? What's the role of a vendor in enabling you to do that?
Well, I think the biggest shift is, and again, this is driven by cloud, is that we're not selling you a thing, we're selling you a service, and so that changes our entire relationship. We're quite literally a partner, as opposed to software kind of developer that we just ship you software and then you have to go manage it all. So we are, and this is a mindset actually equally for the tech industry to kind of get around, which is we are an extension of our customers' IT operations. We're an extension of our customers' security operations. We are not a black box that is sort of just going to manage everything for you, and you can only interface with us through a set of APIs, and that's the only way you're going to be able to experience our technology. We actually fundamentally have to be a business partner that is an extension of your environment. And the thing that we tend to see is, particularly in security organizations, this is maybe most pronounced. You'll have a security organization that is so used to the Amazons of the world or others, which are like, this is some obfuscated system that you don't have any visibility into, and you're just going to have to trust us. And we don't think that's the right approach. We think that you actually do have to understand what we're doing and how we deliver our technology and the nuts and bolts of our systems. We don't necessarily think you should have to care about that, but you should at least have the ability to if you want to. Like if you're GE and you want to audit our systems, go ahead. Like we need to make you as comfortable as possible with how we're doing things, that we're an IT partner to you as opposed to just a vendor or product developer. And so that's sort of one component of that, which is and that's more on the tech industry side. We have to think about ourselves as partners of IT as opposed to just service provider or just building a product. And then I think where we're actually going and probably the biggest shift that we're making is thinking about ourselves as an application that you just use as we give it to you, now to being a platform, which is we're going to give you a set of capabilities that you can mix and match and integrate and develop on top of however you want. There's going to be a set of things that we sort of handle out of the box that will solve problems that we just are really, really good at solving. So sharing and collaboration and managing your content at scale. But there's going to be a lot of things that you're going to do that we will never build the products for. Sure. And so we need complete extensibility of our offering so you can take the components of our system and integrate it into your applications and to your development however you want. And that's and now the power of that, of not having applications just delivered as a service, but having platforms delivered as a service, it becomes incredibly powerful.
So kind of coming back to data and that point, composability. I was at this World Economic Forum summit this weekend, and I bumped into a mutual friend of ours, Anish Chopra, and we were talking about the fact. Anish was talking about the fact for the U.S. government. Anish, for all of you, is the first CTO of the U.S. government, and he was talking about the fact that they have a lot of relevant data, but for most applications, so they have hazard response data.
Right.
But they don't actually know what's going on the ground. So they're trying to partner with folks like Planet Labs, et cetera, to get geospatial imagery to kind of build robust solutions.
Yep.
As if you're talking about composability and kind of providing platform services from your perspective, from a CIO's perspective, what's the role of making that core data asset kind of available to others?
Yeah. So this is maybe another shift that IT has to start to think about, particularly again in any data-rich business or business where your assets, whatever they are programmable to some extent, via APIs. So the first thing that will tend to I'll try and get CIOs to think about, particularly again if you're not in a non-tech business, is imagine if your company, whatever its core asset is, whether again it's data or if it's a product, imagine you had an API into your company and you could let developers build on top of whatever it is you do. What would that look like? So if you're a bank, what would it mean to have your entire bank open as an API? So anybody with a great idea could build an application that was a digital bank or a microservice in some market that you're not going to be able to serve. And imagine that your entire business was exposed by an API. If you are in if you're in any kind of business that generates a wealth of data, so Planet Labs is a satellite company that generates satellite imagery. They're already doing this, but imagine you're a more industrial company that's generating a large amount of data. Let's just maybe
logistics.
Or can I just
sure.
like a Caterpillar or a John Deere? Why aren't these companies and maybe they're doing this, and so correct me if I'm wrong. Why aren't they? What?
John Deere's using a lot of drones and collecting data from tractors and stuff like that from farmers.
Sure. And are they connecting all of the data together though of every single tractor into one data source and then exposing that?
They're not.
Right. So that's the problem. Like they're probably saying like this tractor can generate data for this farm and you can have access to that data. I'm making shit up right now. But the question is, do they connect all of the tractors together, and do they generate all of the data that all of the tractors are connecting, and then sell that back to any farm that wants it? anonymized or whatever. Like every one of these companies is generating immense amounts of data. Are they thinking about it as, what if you had an API into everything that our company and brand is generating? Why is there?
They don't do the commodities traders in Chicago.
Right. Yes, but how are they getting that data? They're having to go to each farm directly, right?
They're not pulling it together, is your point?
Yeah.
Because if you networked it all together, the power of all of that information together would be incredibly amazing if you just stuck a big
Right.
API on it.
Yeah, like the way that Google thinks about this problem is not like we're going to have each individual thing become a silo of data and then we're going to let commodity traders connect it all together. They would say, let's actually just create the biggest farm database in the planet and then have APIs into that. And if someone wants to build a software product, they go to api.deere.com and they just build on top of our platform. And so this mindset of what is your underlying data asset that you have that nobody else has, and how are you going to expose it to your partner ecosystem, to your customer ecosystem, to anyone, and the life sciences firms, all of the data that's generated about the tests that are going on, and all the genomic information they're creating. None of these companies have public APIs into all that information. And so in a world where data is a strategic asset, you could close that off so nobody else has it and then just develop proprietary products, or you could do the exact opposite and open it up to everybody and then have a tremendous amount of innovation happening on your proprietary data set that you will control access to and be able to charge for or generate feedback loops on. And so these are the kinds of changes that I think would be exciting to see more and more companies start to introduce.
Absolutely.
Because you have all this information being generated in these organizations. A logistics company would be the same thing.
Yep, absolutely. And we have logistics companies here. So
Perfect.
we've got 10 and a half minutes left-ish. And
Anybody
we wanted
has
to
any more John Deere stories?
Yeah. We wanted to make this a bit more interactive, so we probably ran 5 minutes over, but we want to open it up to questions. So anyone with any questions, throw them at us.
Otherwise, we can talk more about.
Yeah, we have plenty to talk about.
So one of the things that's interesting is oh, okay, fine, go for it. But then I want to say one thing. Okay, go. Okay. Yes. Yes, that's a great question. I'm going to do something self-serving because I want to bring the thing I was going to bring up. But your question actually prompts that. So you said a lot of friction, right? So one of the bigger parts of friction that we see in a lot of industries is regulatory. So. And this is why it's so interesting to watch Silicon Valley versus the rest of the world. You have, let's say you're a bank, and everything I'm saying is like, yeah, that's awesome. That's like so cool. Why wouldn't you do that? Now you go to JP Morgan, you say, have an API into your entire bank, and they would be like, well, there's no freaking way the OCC or any of the banking regulators are going to let me have an API into my entire bank so anybody can build whatever they want. And so we have another challenge, which is any industry that is highly regulated, so life sciences, financial services, healthcare, they are constrained by a very legacy way of thinking about how these businesses work and the data that these businesses are generating. This is I think this will be one of the biggest blockers of industrial companies being able to adapt quickly enough is either the regulator directly or the compliance team that at least is trying to interpret what the regulator will allow and then blocking that innovation. And so we see this all the time, which is a company a company from Silicon Valley will emerge, and because they have no compliance team, they have no regulatory oversight. It's like 4 people in a garage. They don't worry about like mapping to whatever laws, because like an FCC fine or a Department of Transportation fine doesn't matter if you have no money. So you just start your company, and what happens is it turns out that actually that makes sense that you should be able to have a car on demand, even though we developed our taxi laws to prevent any type of driver being able to pick you up. But now we have the technology to do that safely and securely. And nobody in the taxi industry would have ever come up with that because they're only delivering products within the confines of the existing regulatory environment. No existing massive bank is going to lean in on the disruption angle in a world where they're getting slapped with massive, multi-$100 million or billion-dollar fines every time they screw something up. And so this is where startups and startups or companies coming out of the specific industry that they're disrupting have a huge advantage, because they don't have that, they're not steeped in the all of the sort of friction of that compliance or that regulatory control. Was that? Well, that's funny. I hadn't, yes, actually, sure. And then have that thing running. You probably need a secret sort of ownership structure. I don't know how you do that.
There might be some sort of book on this by Clay Christensen.
Yes,
something
but
like
does
that.
it cover regulatory? The problem is that I don't think JP Morgan could have a wholly owned subsidiary that's doing something that the regulators also. What was that? Robinhood. Yes, then you just have to make sure that you can buy Robinhood after that happens,
at a reasonable
versus
price.
have that thing, sort of emerge and then disrupt you ultimately. But that would be the right approach, right? And this is so now we're getting into the organizational behavior, sets of challenges, which is okay. You're a big company. You have 100,000 employees, right? And you have a massive compliance and legal function, and that massive compliance and legal function actually is larger than your IT and technology function. And so every time you try and do something innovative, the compliance and legal function basically says, well, there's no way we can actually have that data. That's generating personal health information, and we can't store personal health information. And so we have to find ways of figuring out what are the so some things are the regulatory one is just really tough because that one is so binary. But a lot of times it's just cannibalizing your core business, or maybe it's competing with your customer base. We see a lot of companies that avoid building their disruptive technology because it would compete with their primary customer base. And that as we've seen, is exactly the wrong move, because if you don't compete with your customer base, somebody else will emerge that does, and they will serve your customers better than you can, and it won't even matter that you didn't compete with your customers because you'll be dead. So what we're seeing is we're just in an era where everything is changing, everything is moving, and you kind of have to not play by the rules of the past 20 or 30 years. You can no longer rely on just going through your customer. I mean, this is going to happen in droves in the media industry right now, for instance, because what you're going to have is products like HBO or ESPN that are saying, we can't go through the normal cable subscription anymore, because if we do, we're not going to get access to this entire new customer base. And so you're going to see a lot of conflict as the content creators start to go around the content distributors, because they want to reach a much larger customer base, and that's going to create a tremendous amount of conflict. So every industry has their version of that. I think it takes certainly bold leadership. It takes being able to separate out the disruptive functions from the core business, because otherwise the core business kills it, and because it's either fear of cannibalization or it doesn't look profitable at first. So all of the classic innovator's dilemma types of issues, and then yet another one, which is just the regulatory side. Did Clayton think much about the regulatory element to a lot of this disruption, like the low end versus the? He has actually. I think chapter 10 of the Innovator's Dilemma talks about it a little bit. Okay. And he's thought about it pretty extensively, but there's no easy solution, right? You have a lot more to lose as a big company than as a small company, as you pointed out. So. Yeah, and so I think we're gonna see that multiply in the next 3 to 5 years as more and more of these startups are going after traditionally regulated industries. And like 23andMe is a great example. No existing life sciences company would have thought to do 23andMe, because they would be like, well, the personal health information we're generating, that would be a huge liability. What if we screw something up and give people the wrong, the wrong information? Then the FDA will fine us for $1 billion. We couldn't have that happen if we're Pfizer or Eli Lilly. Our brand is too important. And so this is why you're seeing innovation come from the outside, because we're saying, well, it's technically possible to do these things, right? And so why wouldn't we go and build this product? And maybe so now I don't know if anybody's seen the latest. So 23andMe is not this little cute little toy in the industry anymore. They're actually taking all of the data that they're generating from their health kits, and they're actually starting to say, wait a second, we might be able to develop drugs that are solving problems that traditional pharma companies aren't going after, because we just now have better data about populations than anybody else does. So we can go after niches that would otherwise have not looked interesting to a major pharma company, and we can go actually solve very different kind of problems. And so now you have a company who has data as its core asset, getting directly into the drug manufacturing business and drug development business, which again will be incredibly disruptive to traditional life sciences approaches, because this will be a data-driven approach to life sciences as opposed to just purely an R&D, lab-driven approach.
So we've got just a couple minutes left. One more question.
So you went from being one of the people in the garage to a now publicly traded company. How have you preserved the culture of that company as you made the transition?
Yep.
And who are you worried about who's going to disrupt you now?
Yeah. I mean, this is what we think a lot about. So it doesn't hurt that our office looks like a garage. So just in terms of how we keep it up. It still sort of feels like that at times. But we're 1,400 people. We're nearly 1,400 people now. We are in one of the most competitive markets in technology right now. Right, the future of how information and content is going to be managed and stored for enterprises is obviously a big space. We're fortunate that we started 11 years ago, before this whole category was in vogue, and we built the technology platform to support the sort of, any type of thing you want to do, whether it's collaboration or mobility or building an application. Like we've been building that for nearly 11 years. So we are happy that from an architecture standpoint, from a strength of the business standpoint, we have a very strong foundation. At the same time, we still feel like a startup, because we're actually doing another kind of, pivot's the wrong word, but we're doing another era of the company. Like, 10 and a half, nearly 11 years in, we're going from being an applications company to being a platform company. And so in many respects, that feels like you're back in startup mode, where like we have to go reinvent ourselves, and we have to build for the next sort of era of growth. And so that introduces a lot of the qualities of a startup into the culture. There's nothing that we do that can be static. There's not a single thing that we, that we build or sell today that isn't going to look different in 6 or 12 months from now. And so that keeps you on your toes. It keeps you moving quickly. It keeps the culture very focused on disruption, partially disrupting ourselves, but mostly still focused on being on the offensive and driving change kind of outwardly. We're fortunate that there's nothing really cannibalizing our core business as much as just competition that we have to kind of fight off. And I would say that we're always worried about the startup in the garage. The one nice thing about being in the enterprise is that it's really, really hard to build up the technology required to go serve large enterprises. We're in 52% of the Fortune 500 today. We're the standard at GE, at Eli Lilly, at Toyota, at Allergan, at Amgen. So all these businesses that need to invest in the future of their IT environment and how they manage data in the future. We're fortunate that it is really, really hard to go do that. So for now, we are. I don't think there's anybody in the garage that I know of that's going to completely disrupt us. But we're always paying attention to the garage guys and girls, and make sure that we are. We're always on our toes. We do a lot of acquisitions of companies that are building some pretty cool things, and that's, I think, how we're going to stay sharp and focused on disruption.
Yeah, but one of the big constraints you have now as a publicly traded company is quarterly earnings.
Yes.
Right, which as a startup, like you just said, didn't make money, didn't care, but now you have shareholders who are also interested in you. Right?
Yes, they do care, and I think it's interesting. So the quarterly earnings things hasn't really driven too much of a change in the culture. I mean, we like quarterly earnings as much as investors like quarterly earnings. So we are a fan of earning things quarterly, and so I would say that that hasn't really changed the culture. I think that we are, one thing that we've always focused on is the long-term nature of our business and our strategy. So we've been investing in this sort of once-in-a-generation shift from the on-prem world to the cloud. literally for 10 and a half years. And every time that I think that that shift should be over by now, like aren't we done with this? We still realize that there's probably still 90% of that market to go. And all of the companies and all of the data and all of the systems that have to move from the on-prem world to the cloud. So we still have a very long-term perspective. And so even though there is that sort of quarterly clock and timer going, we take a very, very long-term perspective in terms of what we're building, which is why we're building a platform. And we're building a platform for the future of how businesses manage their content and their data. We're not just sort of focused on the near-term kind of application cycles that are going on. But we're only 9 months in, so maybe my answer in 18 months from now will be very different, and I'll be crying and I'll feel like I want to be Michael Dell and go private. So, but right now we don't mind the quarterly side of things.
So I think we're a little over on time, but this has been great. It's what we like to talk about. But I'd love to take the opportunity to thank Aaron.
Cool. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.